more than 6 decades to one of the most extraordinary tournaments in football history. The year is 1962. The location is Chile. Brazil are the defending world champions. Chile is already becoming a global superstar. Garincha is about to produce some of the most unforgettable football ever seen. Chile are the preparing the host the world while still recovering from one of the most devastating earthquakes in modern history. And somewhere along the way, we are going to witness one of the most violent matches in World Cup history. A superstar gets injured, a genius gets sent off, fans campaign to get him into the final, and despite losing their biggest player for famous of tournament, Brazil somehow become world champions again. And here is the incredible part. Brazil won the World Cup without Pele playing after the group stage. So tonight we are going to explore the stories behind the statistics. We are going to talk about Pele. We are going to talk about Garincha. We are going to talk about famous Battle of Santiago. We are going to talk about Chile's incredible run. We are going to relive the final, and we are going to uncover some facts about the 1962 World Cup that even long-time football fans may not know. So if you are watching live, tell me in the chat, what do you think was the real star of the 1962 World Cup, Pele or Garincha? Put your answer in comments right now, and let's travel back to the Chile in 1962. Before we talk about the football, we need to understand what Chile was facing. The 1962 World Cup was awarded to Chile, but just 2 years before the tournament, Chile suffered the most powerful earthquake ever recorded. The 1960 Valdivia earthquake devastated huge areas of country. Infrastructure was badly damaged, communities were destroyed, and suddenly the question was, could Chile still host the World Cup? The answer remarkably was yes. The tournament went ahead, and that gave the 1962 World Cup a fascinating historical background. This was not simply a football tournament. For Chile, hosting the World Cup was also an opportunity to show the world that the country could recover and rebuild. So when the teams eventually arrived, there was enormous significance attached to the event, and the tournament itself was relatively compact. There were 16 teams, 32 matches, and 89 goals. The work out at about 2.78 goals per match, and compared with earlier football World Cups, the tournament represented a noticeable shift toward more defensive tactics. So if you were expecting every match to be a goal fast, 1962 was not quite that tournament, but what it leaked in goal more than made up for in drama, and believe me, there was plenty of drama. Brazil arrived in Chile as defending champions. 4 years earlier, Brazil won the 1958 World Cup in Sweden, and that tournament had introduced the world to teenage phenomenon named Pele. By 1962, Pele was not an unknown teenager anymore. He was already one of the most famous footballers on earth. Brazil had an extraordinary squad. There was Pele, there was Grincha, there was Bava, there was Didi, there was Zito, there was Nilton Santos, and several members of 1958 championship winning team were back. Brazil was not simply happy to win, they were expected to challenge for the title, and then something happened that completely changed their tournament. Brazil opened the tournament against Mexico and they won 2-0. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but then came Brazil's second group match. Brazil faced Czechoslovakia and the match finished 0-0. But scoreline was not biggest story. The biggest story was what happened to Pele. He suffered a muscle injury, and this was 1962. There were no substitutes in the modern sense. So imagine this, one of the greatest players in the world gets injured during World Cup match, and instead of simply bringing another superstar on to find another way to win, and this is where the story 1962 becomes fascinating, because the player who stopped forward was not Pele, it was Min Garrincha. Garrincha was a completely different kind of footballer. Pele was explosive, powerful, technically brilliant, but Garrincha was unpredictable. He was a dribbler, a magician, a player who could make defenders look completely lost. His movement was unusual, his body shape was unusual, and his ability to change direction was extraordinary. He became known by nickname the Joy of People, and once Pele was injured, Brazil needed someone to take responsibility. Garrincha answered in the knockout stage. He became the face of Brazil's attack, and this is where the tournament really starts to become legendary. In the quarterfinal, Brazil faced England, and this was no easy opponent. England were serious contenders, but Brazil produced 3-1 victory, and Garrincha scored twice. Think about that. Pele was unavailable. Brazil were the knockout stage, and Garrincha essentially said, "Don't worry, I have got this." 2 goals against England. Brazil were through the semi-final, and waiting for them were the host Chile. Let's take a moment, appreciate Chile, because this was not simply a host nation making up the numbers. Chile were excellent. They defeated Switzerland in their opening match. Then came one of the most famous matches in the World Cup history, Chile versus Italy. Match would become unknown forever as Battle of Santiago. Chile would eventually win 2-0, but football was almost overshadowed by the violence, and this is one of the most unbelievable stories from the entire tournament. June 2nd, 1962, Estadio Chile versus Italy. The atmosphere was already extremely tense. There had been hostile press coverage from the match and rivalry quickly became explosive. The match descended into violence, pushes, punches were thrown, players were sent off, police had to intervene, and the referee was England's Ken Aston. Remember that name because Ken Aston would later become famous for his role in the development of yellow and red card system. But in 1962, those colored cards did not yet exist, so referees had a much more difficult way to communicating disciplinary decisions. The match became known as Battle of Santiago and Chile won 2-0, but the story was bigger than scoreline. It showed just how intense international football could become in an era before the modern disciplinary system we take for granted. Imagine watching the match without yellow cards appearing on the screen, no VAR, no giant screens, no modern communication system, just the referee, his whistle, his decisions, and sometimes the police. That's how different football was in 1962. Chile were not finished in the quarterfinals. They faced the Soviet Union, and this was another enormous challenge. The Soviet Union were the G9 European champions, but Chile won 2-1, and suddenly the host nation was the semi-final. Imagine the atmosphere. Chile had survived the group stage. They had defeated Italy, they had beaten the European champions, and now they were just one victory away from the World Cup final. But there were one problem standing between Chile and final was Brazil. So guys, now I have to focus on my audience. Thank you everyone. Thank you, thank you. Love you guys. I'm missing your comments. 14 people are watching. 12 people are watching. Thank you. So, FIFA World Cup incredible facts that will blow your mind. Brazil champions for the second time. Yes, Brazil was the champion, consecutive champion winner. I'm missing your comment, guys. I'm missing your comments. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes. Thank you, everyone. Pele was the star, but he was injured. So mention your comments. How is the story of 1962 World Cup? What do you think about the most amazing tournament of FIFA World Cup 1962? Guys, thank you for very much for your watching from every corner of the world, and I am really thankful to all of you from every corner of my heart. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm missing your comments. I'm missing your likes. I hope you will enjoy my live stream. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. The semi-final was played at the Estadio in Santiago. More than 76,000 spectators watched, and the match immediately became showcase for Garrincha. Brazil scored first, Garrincha scored, then he scored again. Chile fought back. George Toro pulled one back. Daniel Sanchez later scored for Chile. The crowd believed Chile were still alive, but Brazil had Wawa, and Wawa scored twice. Final score Brazil 4, Chile 2. Brazil were going to the final. Chile dreamed of winning the World Cup on home soil was over, but Chile still had something to fight for. They would defeat Yugoslavia 1-0 in the third place match and remains Chile's best ever World Cup finish. So although Chile did not reach the final, they made history. And now comes one of the strongest stories of the entire tournament. During that semi-final against Chile, Garrincha was sent off, and that created a huge problem because a sending off meant Garrincha was suspended for the final. Brazil had already lost Pele, and now their other superstar was potentially unbelievable. Imagine the situation: the defending champions are one match away from winning the World Cup. Their great stars is injured, their second superstar has been sent off, and they are supposed to play the final without him. But then something extraordinary happened. The Chilean public themselves wanted to Garrincha to play. Yes, the fans of Team Brazil had just defeated were fascinated by the Brazilian wingers. A petition was organized asking that Garrincha be allowed to play in the final, with support from Chilean President George Alessandri. And amazingly, the request succeeded. Garrincha was allowed to play. So Brazil entered the final with their magician back on the pitch, and now only one team stood between Brazil and back-to-back World Cup, Czechoslovakia. The final, 17th June 1962, Estadio Nacional, Santiago, Brazil versus Czechoslovakia, and the match did not begin the way Brazil wanted. Czechoslovakia scored first. Joseph Masopust put them ahead. For a moment, Brazil were behind. The defending champions were in trouble, but Brazil responded almost immediately, and the player who stepped forward was Amidlo. Remember his name because Amarillo had an enormous responsibility. He had taken Pellé's place in the starting lineup, and now in the World Cup final he scored 1-1. The pressure was back on Czechoslovakia. Then came the second half. Brazil continued pushing, and Zito scored. Brazil were ahead, and Wawa added another. Brazil 3, Czechoslovakia 1, and that was the final score. Brazil were world champions again. And this is one of the most important facts about the 1962 World Cup. Brazil became the second team in the history to win consecutive World Cups. They had won in 1958, and now they had won again in 1962. At the time, they joined Uruguay and Italy as two-time champions, and Brazil's achievement was even more remarkable because they had done it after losing period to injury. FIFA notes that Brazil used only a relatively small portion of their squad during the tournament, reflecting how much faith the team placed in its core player. And here is another incredible detail. Brazil's 1962 trump remains the last time a man World Cup champion successfully defended the title at the very next tournament. So let's answer the question we asked at beginning: who was the real star, Pele or Grincha? Pele played only part of tournament because of injury. Grincha became Brazil's leading attacking force. According to FIFA, Grincha scored 4 goals and provided 3 assists across 6 matches. He scored twice against England, then twice against Chile, and he became the face of Brazil's championship run. In the FIFA describes 1962 as essentially the World Cup of Grincha, and one Chilean newspaper famously asked Grincha, "What planet is the form?" That's how extraordinary his performance was. Now here is something that surprises many people. There was not one disputed top scorer at the 1962 World Cup. Instead, several players finished with 4 goals. They included Grincha of Brazil, Wawa of Brazil, Lionel Sanchez of Chile, Florian Albert of Hungary, Valentin Ivanov of Soviet Union, and Drazen Jelkovic of Yugoslavia. 6 players, 4 goals each, and Florian Albert deserved special attention because he reached 4 goals in only 3 matches. So when someone asked who was the Golden Boot winner in 1962, the answer is more complicated than you might expect. Here is another brilliant piece of World Cup history. Wawa scored in the 1958 final and then scored in 1962 final and made him the first player to score in two different World Cup finals. Think about the players who later matched that achievement: Pele, Paul, Brinter, Zinedine Zidane, Kylian Mbappe, and Wawa was first at 1962. He scored the goal that effectively sealed Brazil's champion. Here is something younger football fans might find almost unbelievable. In 1962, substitutes were not available in the way we understand them today. So when Pele was injured against Czechoslovakia, Brazil could not simply bring another player onto the pitch. They had to continue, and Pele's injury became a defining moment of the tournament. Today, a team can make several substitutes during the match. Back then, you were expected to keep going. That dramatically changed how players approached injuries and fatigue, and it helps explain why in 1962 World Cup feels like it came from a completely different era of football. The statistics tell us something fascinating. The tournament produced 89 goals across 32 matches. That's an average of 2.78 per goal per game. At the time, that was unusually low compared with earlier World Cups. Defensive tactics were becoming more important. Teams were becoming more organized. Football was evolving, and 1962 sits as an interesting point in football history. The game still had the raw physicality of earlier decades, but tactical discipline was becoming increasingly important. And you could see the tension throughout the tournament. Brilliant attackers had challenges, compact defenses, and matches that could become extremely physical. We also have a give Chile its moment. The host nation finished third. They defeated Yugoslavia 1-0 in the third place match, and that remains Chile's best ever finish at the Men's World Cup. So imagine the story Chile could tell. A devastating earthquake had struck the country only 2 years before the tournament. They still hosted the World Cup. Then their national team reached the semi-final. They defeated the Soviet Union. They finished third, and millions of people around the world watched. For Chilean football, 1962 became the defining moment. Okay, let's do a quick fire round. I am going to give you some facts, and I want you to tell me in the chat which one surprised you the most. Fact number 1: Brazil won the tournament without Pele playing after the group stage. Fact number 2: Garrincha scored 4 goals and was one of 6 players tied on 4 goals. Fact number 3: Wawa scored in 2 different World Cup finals. Fact number 4: Chile finished third, their best World Cup finish ever. Fact number 5, Chile match against Italy become known as the Battle of Santiago. Fact number 6, Garincha was sent off in the semi-final and initially faced missing the final. Fact number 7, Chilean fans actually supported the effort to get Garincha on to the final. Fact number 8, Brazil became the second nation to win consecutive World Cup. Fact number 9, the tournament produced 89 goals in 32 matches. And finally, fact number 10, Brazil's 1962 championship remains the last time a men's World Cup champion successfully defended its title at the next edition. Now tell me, which fact shocked you the most? Now let's debate. Imagine you could choose only one player from 1962's team. Would you choose Pele or Garincha? Pele was the superstar, the global icon, but Garincha became the player who carried Brazil's through the knockout stage after Pele's injury. And that's why 1962 is so interesting. It was not simply the story of one superstar, it was the story of team finding another way to win. When Pele disappeared from the tournament, Brazil did not collapse. Garincha stepped forward, Amarillo stepped forward, Wawa stepped forward, Zito stepped forward, and Brazil became champions again. That is what makes the World Cup so special. When people talk about the greatest World Cups, they often mention 1958, they mention 1970, they mention 1986, they mention 2002, but 1962 deserved to remember because it had almost everything: a recovering host nation, a defending champion under enormous pressure, a teenager superstar who became injured, a magical winger who took over the tournament, a brutal match that became from known as the Battle of Santiago, a host nation reaching the semi-final, a suspension drama, a petition to get a superstar into the final, and finally Brazil lifting the World Cup again. The 1962 World Cup was not perfect, it was not always beautiful. At times it was brutal, at times it was defensive, but it was unforgettable, and perhaps that is the best definition of great World Cup. Not simply the number of goals, not simply the number of stars, but the stories. And 1962 had stories that football still remembers more than 60 years later. And that brings us to the end of our journey through 1962 FIFA World Cup. Brazil were champions, Czechoslovakia were runners-up, Chile finished third, and Garincha emerged as the unforgettable star of tournament. But now I want to hear from you. Who was your favorite player from the 1962 World Cup? Was it Pele, Garincha, Wawa, Amarildo, Didi, or perhaps one of Chile's heroes like Daniel Sanchez. And here is one more question. Do you think Brazil could have won the 1960 World Cup if Grincha had been suspended for the final? Let me know in the chat. So guys, I'm missing your comments, I'm missing your likes. Thank you very much. Uh, and if you enjoyed this trip back through football's history, make sure you support the live stream, like the video, subscribe if you have not already, and share this with someone who loves classic football, because these are so many incredible World Cup stories that have almost disappeared from popular memory. Thank you for joining me tonight, and remember, football is not about the matches, it is about the stories that survive long after the final whistle. I will see you in the next stream. Good night, everyone, and viva football. So, thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for your great support, for your great and precious time. I am really thankful to all of you from every corner of my heart. Thank you, great support. You are supporting my channel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Love you guys. We will meet you again. It's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye. Bye bye.